Hello, I'm Holly Baker.
Hello, I'm Devin Fairchild.
And I am Scott Lowe, and today we would like to invite you to join us in uncovering the fascinating story that is the origin of the English lexicon. The modern English lexicon is composed of an absolutely massive 1,022,000 words, of which the average educated person uses approximately 44,000. Now, there are two processes which supplement the efflorescence of lexical diversity within the English language. The first of which exercises an exceptional capacity of the English language to subsume the lexicons of other languages in order to generate new words, and these words are referred to as loanwords. The second exercises a propensity of the English language to apply existing grammatical structure and morphological rules to generate new words from pre-existing words within the English lexicon. We will begin this video with the introduction of loan words into the English lexicon and the multitude of sources from which they are derived. As evidenced by the chart presented here, the English language has an exceptionally variant composition, consisting predominantly of words originating from French and Latin, which we will be reviewing later in this video. Another considerably large component of the modern English lexicon are genuine English words which have originated as a result of the application of morphological processes which have predicated their creation. We will begin, however, with an overview of the two fundamental languages which influence the generation of new words within the English lexicon, both past and present, Greek and Latin. Some examples of words and affixes which entered into the English lexicon from Greek are physikos, becoming our physics, psyche, becoming our psyche, philos, becoming our philo or phile, murios, becoming our myriad, heros, becoming our hero, pura, becoming our pyre or pure, muthos, becoming our myth, theos, becoming our theo, and logike from logikos, becoming our logic. Many of these Hellenic words would enter into the Latin lexicon through social interaction and cultural amalgamation with the Romans before being inherited into the Old English lexicon. Additionally, some examples of Latin words which would come to be inherited are filius or filia, becoming our filial, somnus, becoming most recognizable into our insomnia, senator, becoming our senator, argumentum, becoming our argument, pulchra, becoming our pulchritude, schola, becoming our school, scholar, and scholastic, jurisprudentia, becoming our jurisprudence, and sciens, becoming science, in addition to many, many more. From here, both Greek and Latin words such as the aforesaid would be preserved in both ecclesiastical texts and sacred manuscripts until their resurgence in popularity during the Renaissance, among other historical influences. Additionally, of considerable pertinence was the influence of the Scandinavian language as it was adopted into the Old English lexicon.
From the late 9th century until the end of the Anglo-Saxon period, there were two regions in England, the Danelaw under Scandinavian law, and the rest of England under Anglo-Saxon law. The boundary was from London to Chester and ran diagonally across the English Midlands. The earliest Scandinavian influence on English lexis comes from cases where the following reasoning applies. Cognate words existed in Old English and in early Scandinavian. A word's form is found in later English lexicon that developed from one of the two. The early Scandinavian word could have given rise to the later word form in English, but development from the Old English form could not have. In the strongest cases, etymology demonstrates that it is not likely that Old English could have had any unattested variant from form that could explain the later English form.
And presented here are a few examples of words which entered into the Old English lexicon from Scandinavian. These consist of words such as the Scandinavian skirta, which became the Old English skirta, which became our skirt and shirt respectively. Another example is the Scandinavian skadi, which became the Old English sheada, becoming our scathe. and additionally the Scandinavian skell, which became the Old English shell, becoming our shell, in addition to many of the other words listed here before you.
"1066 CE marked the Norman Conquest. From that period until Middle English, the language of nobility was French and Latin, while the language of the common people was English. Many loanwords came into English from Latin and French during that time. Around 45% of English vocabulary is of French origin, most coming from Anglo-Norman spoken by the upper classes in England for several hundred years after the Norman Conquest, before the language settled into what became Middle English, Early Modern English, and present-day English. Fully integrated as English word of French origin, such as art, competition, force, machine, money, police, publicity, rule, routine, and even table, are pronounced with English rules of phonology instead of French rules of phonology. These words are commonly used by English speakers without recognition of their French origin. In the Middle English period, many words likely came directly from French, with the French maintaining determining factor of the word's form and meaning, and Latin was at most a secondary influence. A smaller but significant number of words can be, with some certainty, be said to be solely from Latin, not French. In many cases, it cannot be said with complete certainty that a word is from French rather than Latin, or vice versa, and in most of these cases, composite origin from both languages seems to have been the most likely what had happened. In the Middle English period, Geoffrey Chaucer wrote in English. This was significant for the re-establishment of English as the language of England, and is also significant because he was one of the first since the Norman invasion to write in English and the language of the common people. This was also significant to the Lexicon because Chaucer introduced many words from Latin and French.
During the early modern period of English, Shakespeare was also significant in lexicon building because he made up words and introduced many Latin and French words into the lexicon again. Shakespeare introduced and invented over 1,700 words for the building the English lexicon. He introduced such words as addiction, arch-villain, assassination, bedazzled, belongings, cold-blooded, disheartened, eventful, eyeball, fashionable, half-blooded, inaudible, manager, newfangled, pageantry, scuffle, swagger, and uncomfortable. In review of the aforementioned words, one can see examples of linguistic processes such as compounding words like cold-blooded, or the creative use of prefixes like in the word arch-villain. These are samples of the new patterns of lexical creation that carry over into the modern English era.
Approaching modernity, we observe a distinct transition from the predominance of the subsumption of new words from alternative lexicons into the English language toward an application of grammatical structures and morphological rules on pre-existing words to create new ones. This facilitated a doubling in the size of the English lexicon within the last century. There are 5 principal processes which result in the expansion of the English lexicon: blending, combining, creating, shifting, and shortening. Blending is the process of mixing parts of 2 existing words, the resultants of which are also referred to as portmanteaus. Some examples of this process are the derivation of brunch from breakfast and lunch, and sport from spoon and fork. Combining occurs in 2 primary processes: compounding, which is creating a new word by combining 2 or more standalone words, and affixation, which is creating a new word using affixes, such as prefixes and suffixes. Some examples of this process are the formation of notebook from note and book, and blueberry from blue and berry. Creating occurs in 3 primary ways: root creation, which is the creation of a word out of elements with no inherent meaning, often when expressing pain; echoic words, which result from the creation of onomatopoeic words or symbolic imitation of sounds; and ejaculations, which are highly conventionalized natural utterances. Shifting is a process whereby words are introduced via a function shift, or the conversion of nouns, verbs, and adjectives into other words. It occurs most commonly as a result of proper nouns becoming common words. Shortening, like creating, occurs in 3 main processes: clipping, or cutting the part of a word; abbreviation, in which a word or collection of words is shortened by taking the initial letters and combining them together, which most commonly occurs either as an acronym, which is pronounceable, or an initialism, which is not. And back formation, wherein a new word is formed from an older word from which it is assumed to be the natural derivative. As evidenced by this chart, the majority of new words enter into the modern English lexicon as a result of compounding and affixation, especially in consideration of the recent technological advancements and social changes which often predicate the development of new words within modernity. A shining example of this shift in methods for English lexical expansion is found in the generation of new words within Ebonics.
Ebonics is already beginning to introduce new words through processes such as metathesis for words like ask, which are quickly becoming ax, returning to an old preceding variant in Old English. Other words are beginning to take on entirely new meanings. We can view the development of new quasi-modal verbs like fixin' to, which is considered on par with other quasi-modal verbs like bound to, going to, and supposed to. Both of these have diatonic and epistemic meaning, making sure that they are becoming quasi-modal verbs. Even this development has a modern derivative being formed like finna or fista. One can also see examples of blending in this emerging dialect, like the word y'all, which is a contraction of you and all. This dialect is quickly becoming a socioeconomic marker for a larger group of Southern American English speakers, and it continues developing through the present day.